everyone, thanks for tuning in. I'm Neville Judd from Hexagon TV. Few events better epitomize the resourcefulness, ingenuity, and innovation in the face of adversity than the response to the Manefay slide at Bingham Canyon in 2013. The largest mining landslide in recorded history left devastation in its wake and an uncertain future for the century-old mine. Dr. Brad Ross led the team charged with developing the geotechnical studies and mine planning to demonstrate the long-term viability of the mine. They quickly accomplished what many had previously considered to be nearly impossible goals. Dr. Ross, we appreciate you joining us.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, Neville. It's great to be here.
Thank you. Dr. Ross, the mine anticipated a slope failure weeks, if not months before, but the scale of the damage wasn't anticipated. Describe the scene to us on April the 10th, what that was like, and the immediate challenges you and your team faced.
Well, April 10th is when it happened. It happened at 9:30 at night. So since it was dark, we didn't really know the impact. It wasn't until the next morning that it actually got interesting. And in fact, that night on the 10th, after it happened, the general manager called all the managers. When he called me, which is just a few minutes after it happened, I said, I'm on my way. We're going to go find out what's happened and everything. His words were, no, you have to go to bed. He said, I need somebody in charge tomorrow, and you're it. And so I got a lot of sleep that night, let me tell you. But the next day, it was an amazing event because we were really trying to figure out, what happened. It was not nearly what we expected. Much more devastation. As a matter of fact, the next morning, when the news came out and the news firms actually had helicopters with videos going on that was coming on TV. And when we brought that up, I had an entire team of people that was, starting to work the process. And when the news came up and we brought it up on the TV, it was complete silence in this beehive of activity, just completely silenced for a while. We stopped at that point and said, okay, turn off the TV. We know we've got work to do because there was much more damage, much more equipment was damaged than we ever thought possible. The run out was much bigger than we thought possible. And so it was really trying to figure out, what do we have left? First and foremost, how do we keep people safe during this? Because there was certainly some hazards there that we hadn't anticipated. And so that was the next day, just trying to figure that out. So it was a very interesting day.
I bet. Now, I know in your book you talk about some of the goals at the time as being described as almost impossible. What were the goals at that stage?
Well, let's start with the very first one. Some of them happened before the failure actually occurred. But so the not the next day after it happened, but the day after that, the managers at the mine met early in the morning to try to figure out what do we have left, what do we know, what do we don't know, how do we get people so that they get the care. There's a lot of people in shock at that point. Nobody was hurt, nobody was injured or anything, but people were in shock. And so we were discussing that about halfway through that meeting, so probably 9 o'clock in the morning. The general manager says to us, we have a goal. Our goal is to be in operation someplace by the end of the day. Exactly. That was kind of the response from everybody is no way.
Yeah.
There is no way we can be in operations at the end of the day. We were under what was called a 103K order, meaning that anything we did had to be approved by MSHA, by the federal government. Think about that. Anything you do has to be approved by the federal government. Our people were in shock. They thought they basically, after seeing the photos, everybody thought that the mine was basically shut down. They didn't have a job anymore. And even if we could get people, their PPE and everything was in an area that we couldn't go into. And so, our response was no way. We cannot be in operations by the end of the day. And the general manager, young man, 34, 35 years old at the time, says, I understand, but our goal is to be in any place by the end of the day. And The rest of us managers once again said, no way. And we went down through the same list of issues. He said, look, I understand all the problems. This is coming down from the Kennecott CEO, Kelly Sanders, and he's saying that it's really important for us to find a way, if at all possible. And we changed. We went from what we couldn't do to what we would have to do to make that happen. And that's a pretty important change in reality. And you know, what would we have to do to get the 103K order? Well, we'd have to have a plan. We'd have to be able to communicate it to MSHA and all these different steps. And we went down through the process. Now, we didn't make it. Midnight came and went, and we were not in operations. By 1 o'clock in the morning, we were. Unbelievable. And, you know, we all thought that was an impossible goal to begin with, and we missed it by 1 hour. And it could have taken months, to be honest with you. But we didn't take any shortcuts. We found a place that there was, you know, absolutely no risk. That's how we got MSHA to approve it and everything. But it changed things, right? So we went from a workforce that thought they were out of work to a workforce saying, wow, we're back to work. We went from a community that thought they'd lost their largest employer to a community that was saying, how can we help? And so, you know, how do you shut down a mine forever that's already back to work? And so it changed just a whole sequence of events from that point forward.
It's almost symbolic in a way.
It was very symbolic, and really changed the outlook of a lot of people. And I think was the start of why we were so successful afterwards.
Right. How did that culture of innovation, resourcefulness develop that was so key to solving these challenges?
You know, we knew the failure was coming. We didn't know exactly when to begin with. And you think about this mine is a huge mine. It's 2.5 miles across, 3/4 of a mile deep. And we were still working at that point. We were still having people go into the mine. And we as managers every day would ask, well, what was the movement the day before? Because we knew that if it's starting to accelerate, that's when you have to really start worrying. If it's kind of continuous movement, that's okay, but if it starts to go faster, that's a problem.
Right.
And so at some point, somebody said, well, if we as managers want to know that information, what about our employees that go down to the pit every day? You know, don't they need that information? Because they had the ability not to go to work. You know, part of our policy was if you didn't feel like it was safe, you did not have to do the job. And so we actually started communicating the same information that the management had to the entire workforce. And that communications actually built a really strong trust between the leadership and the workforce that followed through. And when we started having creating these impossible goals, it was kind of that trust that was built on, and made a big difference at the end of the day.
Right. Describe the role that technology played in the aftermath in.
Well, it was critical. So we had situations that we never thought we would have to face. You know, we expected the failure to act like all the previous 107 years of history told us they should act, which is the failure would dilate out, get to over a period of time, hours, maybe days, go to an angle of repose, you go in, you go fix it. That's what we expected. What we had these gigantic scarps up to 600 foot high, thousands of feet long. We had a massive material at the top, the headscarp on the very top, that was sitting on that Manefay bed, that weak Manefay bed. So there's 40 million tons of material sitting up there that could be unstable yet. And so we had that hazard sitting there. So, the technology that we were able to bring in included the use of remote controlled equipment at a level that nobody had ever seen before. We moved tens of millions of tons of material with remote controlled equipment because we couldn't put people on that mass. Yeah. And as we worked down below it, also we had to use remote controlled equipment there. So in just a very short period of time, we actually brought in all this new dozers, new trucks and everything. We installed 25 pieces of remote controlled equipment and had it working and solving problems in less than 3 months. That's incredible, actually. That's one of those impossible goals that that we've been talking about. And so we did things such as nobody had ever put a remote controlled piece of equipment on an excavator, a large excavator before. We identified that excavators would be an important piece for us to be able to do our work. In just a few weeks, not only had we found the right people to help us put brand new, untested, ever used before remote control systems on an excavator, but we had a large shop, and so from April 10th to July 3rd or 4th, we actually put the systems on, had them working, and actually demolished this gigantic shop that was in a hazardous area. Yeah. And all that was done by July 4th. Unbelievable. And so the technology and the innovation and the speed of the innovation was just incredible. And that's just one case.
Right. You wrote a book about the experience. I believe it's called Lessons from the Manefay, or Rise to the Occasion? Rise to the Occasion. Why did you decide to do that?
Well, look at, I've been in the industry for a while, a few decades, right? Very quickly, it was obvious that this was a unique event, number one. Number two, that what was accomplished during that period of time, because we went from this huge Manefay, the failure, didn't understand that it was going to work that way, to 7 months later being back in normal production, faster than we ever thought possible. And so I knew that it was a pretty unique, not just event, but the reaction to it was just amazing. The teamwork, the leadership, the innovation that we did, and how quickly we did it was impressive, even as we were doing it, because it was all things that we didn't think we could do.
So almost 7 years later, do you think today's technology would perform better in helping a mine anticipate the kind of?
Oh yeah, the technology is we're in the fourth industrial revolution, right? And technology is changing unbelievably fast. The radar systems that we have today are, we had great radar systems then. We've got much better right now than we had then. The computing capacity, the ability to look at three-dimensional models, geotechnical models, is much greater today. Things such as INSAR, radar from satellites. We actually did the Geotechnical Center of Excellence that I've built. We actually went back with Rio Tinto and a company called 3BG to look at, could we detect those failures, that failure mass even sooner, and absolutely much earlier than we thought possible. And so those are all technologies that are really important that will help us. But as great as those technologies are, what we can't forget about is the human side of it. Those technologies are not really that valuable without the skilled geotechnical engineers that understand that technology, understands what it means, the information that they get from it, and what to do about it. And there's a shortage there. We in our industry have a shortage of really skilled geotechnical engineers, and so that's actually our weakest link right now. The technology is advancing, and it's amazing, but we also have to consider the human side of it. And just like the Manefay, if we had just relied on technology, the information was there, but it took some people really looking at it and understanding what that meant, because when they identified that this failure was going to happen, it was only moving 1/10 of an inch per day, and in a big mine like that can be considered almost background. And if they hadn't seen different things and been able to understand what that meant, we wouldn't have been able to predict Manefay. And so it's still true today but that human part of it is just as important, and maybe in some ways more important than the technology.
I think you've alluded to the answer to my next question in that previous answer, but I'll ask it anyway. Can you sum up the lessons of...
Well, it might be a little bit different than you think. Okay. First of all, there's lots of lessons from the Manefay, everything from safety to technology. But when you're talking about, I want to answer this one just in the focus of innovation. So, and rules. So we create rules because something has gone wrong, and because there's a cost to that, whatever it is that's gone wrong, we create a rule. But what we don't think about is what's the cost of having the rule. What the Manefay did is it told us the cost of having certain rules. And we knew that every day that if we were delayed, it would cost us millions of dollars every single day. So we knew that we had to do things differently than we normally did, because if you actually used the process that we would have normally used and the way we normally did business, it could have taken us years, right? So that's billions of dollars. So we knew we had to do things differently. So we broke a lot of rules, an amazing number of rules in all kinds of areas, whether it's procurement or how we let really young, fairly new engineers make decisions that they would normally never get a chance to do at that level of their career. Right. They did fantastic. And so we broke those rules, and that's how we actually were able to create the innovation and to have the time. And what we did is we replaced rules with goals. And having those common goals and knowing where we needed to be and letting people find ways to do that is actually how we created that innovation. And so thinking about our rules that we have, the larger the company, the more things that have probably gone wrong in the past, and therefore the more rules you have generally. Thinking about those rules and maybe how do we replace some of those rules with goals? If you really want to have an innovative company, I think that's the way you have to go about it.
It's a fascinating story. Thanks so much for joining us today, Dr. Ross.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Cheers. We'd like to thank our guest, Dr. Brad Ross, for joining us today. To find out more information about this topic, Dr. Ross has written a book, Rise to the Occasion, Lessons from the Bingham Canyon Manefay Slide. It's available on Amazon. He also has a website, risetotheoccasion.net. To find additional stories, also visit hexagonmining.com, and to tune in to additional episodes, visit hxgnspotlight.com. Thanks for tuning in.